Sign.
Oh, thank you. Okay, let me pull my panels up here. Thank you, Lisa. So Jose, I think, is in another meeting, and he will join us shortly. And Lisa is trying to play double duty, sitting in the Board of Supervisors meeting and starting the conference for us. So we are going to let her do her thing, and I'll give it another minute or so, just looking to make sure we have everyone that's signed up to attend. And while we're waiting another minute or two, one of the things that I wanted to talk about at this session was some of the comments we've heard from different committee members or task force members on and where they conflict between each other. So by kind of be thinking about some of those more controversial issues that are in parks and recs and open space. So I want to make a list of those. At least one more person we're waiting for.
So, Jan, I just had a call from Dennis Hayes and just forwarded him the link to the meeting. He was having a little trouble getting in.
Okay, thank you. Yep. That is who I was looking for.
I thought it might be.
Oh, no.
Okay, I don't see him. So Lynn, let me know if you hear from him again. But we can go ahead and get started. So they have, and I am getting an echo. Somewhere. So I don't know if you guys
Hi,
want.
Jen. This is Lisa Connors.
Hi.
I wanted to just remind everyone for your audio, you really need to have your microphones turned on mute. And just be careful about that because it really does impact the audio. And also wanted to let everyone know this is being recorded.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, I think that everyone, thank you everyone for muting. So Parks, Rec, and Open Space is what we're going to talk about today. Thanks for everyone for joining. And what we talked about during our task force meeting is that there have been multiple versions of this document that have gone around, and we have some comments that have been made during the task force that are contradicting each other. And so we need to come up with how we're going to solve the ones that are contradictory, or we're going to keep sending around updates and edits to this draft document that we have where things get pulled out and things get put back in. And so I wanted to start by kind of coming up with a list of things that you all think are those conflicting items. And I started a list myself, and I thought we could just kind of add to the list. So I'll go ahead, Bill.
I'm sorry, I saw your lips moving but didn't hear sound, so I was just saying you're on mute, but you're not.
Okay, so this is the introductory list that I came up with, and I meant to add on here the turf fields that came up at last meeting. So what I have heard, just from listening to the task force, what I have heard is talk about the urban park framework and the Fairfax policy plan, where there are sections of the document where we might assume, for instance, that the urban parks framework would be used in the TSA area, but do we adopt that for all of Reston, or do we use a different section of that framework for the parts of Reston that are outside of the TSA, or do we come up with our own Reston standards? And the reason why I have that on the list is because there's been lots of comments about pocket parks and whether we consider pocket parks in Reston to actually be a park or not a park, because I think that we have the option to do that, you know, do one of these three, a combination of these three. And so I thought that that was one issue we might want to talk about. The other thing that I've heard people say is about the community, the different community organizations that contribute to the Parks Rec and Open Space. Do we list the community organizations, especially in the top of the document? Do we list them in the different sections that are applicable to them? Do we focus just on, you know, Fairfax County Park Authority? How do we want organizations in the document, and what's the purpose for their inclusion? And then on facilities that we've had as a list, you know, an ongoing list of should we aspire to add these types of facilities to Reston in the future. We've talked about, do we list them as individual units, or do we list them as whole items? So a good example of that is the recreation center that has been in the plan, I think at least the last 3 times. So the rec center, people have an idea of what might go into that rec center. And so right now it's listed as one whole unit with a couple of the facilities within that unit on the chart. But there's also been suggestions of listing each of the items in the rec center, like a pool or track or you know, rooms that people can rent or racquetball or whatever's going in that rec center, list them all separately instead of listing it as a full rec center. And then should we have a priority list or not to the wish list items that we'd like to see in Reston? Should we put them in any type of priority order? Do we list only the recreation open space that is within Reston proper, within the actual borders of Reston, or do we also look at some of the county-wide facilities that might serve Reston residents? There's been debate back and forth over time about Barron Cameron Park and its master plan and its potential new sports tourism plan and how that gets written into the plan. And then there is a list of all the parks, recreation, and open space, or if it's not a complete list, I think it's probably about 90% of the way there, of all of those that we have in Reston. And so do we use that document somehow in the comp plan? Does it go into the section? Does it get listed as an appendix? Is it useful for other future planning committees to know what parks, rec, and open space items we have within Reston? And then the other one I had is the allocation of funds for future facilities. How do those allocation of funds, where do they go and how are they used? which is kind of goes towards an implementation piece of the chapter that we seem to be having as a theme in other chapters, but I'm not sure we have an implementation strategy yet in this document. And then, like I just said, I added the turf fields because there was some debate at the last meeting on whether turf is good or not so good. So that was my list. Did anyone else have other things that you feel like you've heard mentioned that that might be debatable in this document so far?
Jennifer, this is Larry. The only one I can think of, and I know there's been, some discussion about it, and I'm not taking a stance on it at this point because our board already has a stance on it, but was the language with respect to the golf courses.
Okay. Yep, so you're right. I remember that one.
Jennifer, this is Jan. I thought Supervisor Alcorn wanted it to remain as it is stated already in the master plan. He didn't want any more changes to that, just leave it alone. That's my understanding from his comment that he sent out in response to our discussion of whether the golf courses should remain or not. He was pretty clear about that.
That
Yeah,
they
that was
shouldn't
my
change.
understanding as well, that it should just stay the same. It is not to be touched.
Right.
This go round.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were pretty assertive about that. We all got an email on that, stating that position.
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess we'll look at a reference from the current plan and see how golf courses are there. Because I honestly don't know whether the language has changed or not between our current plan and whatever is currently in the draft.
I don't think they're even mentioned in the current plan.
Oh, okay.
I thought they were. I came across them. One of my readings.
Yeah.
They are mentioned under neighborhoods
Thank you.
in the current plan.
I thought I saw them. Yeah.
But mostly, I think he didn't want us to be fighting over it, so.
Yeah, right. He made his statement. I think we should just move on from that. We've got plenty more to discuss. These are great, Jennifer.
The one item would be the trails, and where do they go? Do they go in transportation or they go in parks?
I think they go both places, John, and maybe not maps, but I think the substance of them, the fact that they are a form of urban park and a form of general park in the system makes them at least worth describing, if not listing all of them.
It's not so much the description, it's what you're going to recommend. Does that go in the trails or does that go in the recreation or in the transportation?
Maybe in greater detail in the transportation, but at least there needs to be a reference in this as well, I think. I think another thing is some of the language describing civic plazas. There needs to be something more about the need for civic plazas near the stations. So.
I think that the trails belong in transportation. We're trying to cut the length. We
Yeah.
can certainly mention the trails and say, for reference, look in transportation because they
Good.
are a connectivity link. But we do not want to replicate ideas all over this plan other than to reference. Go to this section. We're trying to cut the pages so that the plan is readable, not have a Britannica. So for that reason, I think they go, because of the connectivity, they go in transportation. I know somebody brought that up at the last, they belong in parks. Well, they have adjunct features, but they are connectivity, which is transportation.
You have to be careful of mentioning them in more than one chapter because each time you do that, they're worded a little bit differently. And what has happened in the last comp plan is that reputation leads to nothingness. So when you have conflicting recommendations or conflicting words, then you really can't use it as a tool in the review process.
Well, what would you recommend then, John, from your experience is?
Once, mention it once, the recommendation should be in one place.
Okay.
And let me say one more thing about that. You know, the tendency of this group is to have very long language and have a lot of descriptions instead of recommendations. And so I would concentrate on making recommendations rather than just including things ad hoc in there. It just leads to nobody reading the plans, which the last plan had some good points, but it was largely ignored in an awful lot of places that because it was so long and so much repetition. So I just would be careful of that. But I mean, you're the task force. You should write this in the way you think is best.
Well, we depend on you to tell us how it's used and what the most effective way to get the idea across is.
Yeah, well, saying it once is the most effective way, and not a lot of description.
I guess I disagree with you to this extent. There is a lot of emphasis on urban park standards and how urban parks fit into the TSAs, and trails, pathways, all are part of accomplishing the urban park goals. So at least describing the fact that we have a lot of them and more are required, see the transportation section is where you'll find the recommendations, but at least in terms of description, it's important for people to know it's part of the package. The other thing is I have urged that we make a clear recommendation that trails be established into Lake Fairfax Park, which abuts the Wheelie area, both along Sunset Hills and Wheelie itself. And that's just, that's 500 plus acres, much of which is woodlands that people should be hiking in, but they don't know about it and don't have access to it. So that's not so much a transportation issue, it's a true park issue. And it's easy to do. It might take cooperation with property owners or RA, but it's easy to do, and it's insane that we don't have that now.
Bill, the issue with the TSAs, of course, is there are no trails, no Reston trails going through that area that I'm aware of. How would you work it so that we could insist that there are trails through that area? Because if you just leave it as an open suggestion, it will never happen.
Well, I'm happy to be very specific about how it gets done. As far as maybe trails and pathways and cycle tracks, I think I equate as more or less the same thing, different ways of moving laterally, some of which is for transportation, some of which is for pleasure. Hiking into Lake Fairfax Park is, to me, pure pleasure, but you ought to have it.
Yeah, I agree with you there, but I'm saying
I'll give you language
for years to try to get the trail system put into the TSAs, and we haven't gotten any. And so I would. It's nice to put it into there, but how do we insist that it happen?
Put it in there.
This Larry, I think the difficulty, Dennis, is that in the TSAs, because of the density and the grid of streets that's being built, they're accommodating sidewalks in all those places. I having mapped out all the natural areas in the TSAs a few years ago with Claudia, there aren't that many opportunities other than, one parallel to the toll road, for instance, if that can even be fit in. The difficulty, as you well know, is the hodgepodge, application and development approval with very little interparcel coordination
Yep.
in advance of the entitlements. And so I think it's really difficult, but I think once all the sidewalks and the roads are done, there's going to be decent connectivity in there. It won't be RA trails.
Well, I doubt that, but I can hope for the best.
I will
Before
mention
we
that.
get in, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Before we get into any specific topic in detail, does anyone have any additional topics that you think that we haven't settled on, didn't make it into the chapter? There's been talk from two different sides as to whether it should be A, B, or C.
Does 3A include the indoor recreational facility? The first one under 3?
Yes, and I'll
Okay, good.
change these to,
Thank you.
instead of bullets, I'll change them to, so we can reference them. But yes, that one speaks to, should it be as a rec center on the list, or should it be the 5 different things that are going in the rec center, each listed separately, maybe with a comment that says, we'd like all these 5 things to be put together in a rec center.
Yep.
Any other?
Hi, Jennifer. This is Charles.
Yes.
And forgive me, I'm in a car right now in the rain. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
One thing, and maybe everyone's in agreement with this, but a part of the plan is the sports tourism idea, like building the big sports tourism facility. And there's just an open question, are we all in agreement that we want to be a sports tourism destination? And, it has implications, it's good for the hotel business and maybe our prestige, and then you weigh it against things. I think the research plan said there'd be 800,000 visitors a year. And, can we accommodate that traffic, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
But
I'll include that under, we have Barron Cameron Park on this list, so I'm going to add the sports tourism facility there. So when we discuss it, we'll discuss both.
And that's where that would be built, is in Barron Cameron Park.
That's my understanding from looking at the presentation that I've seen, which I think, what is it, a Braddock District supervisor website, or is it, I think it's Braddock, right? Not Sully.
Yeah.
Springfield, I think.
Oh, it's Springfield. Okay. So on the Springfield supervisor site, those presentations is what I have seen, and my
I
understanding
think
is
it's
it's Barron
Springfield.
Cameron.
That's what I remember. All right, let's pick a topic and start.
Yes. Anyone want to volunteer one? Because the idea here is that we're going to discuss the topics, either come to a resolution that we feel the majority of this group can live with. And if we do not, then we're going to come up with alternatives, and we're going to take them back to the task force. We're going to vote on them there. And whatever we come up with is what gets written into the chapter. So we can't edit each other's items out once it's been voted on.
Let's just start with number 1 and work our way down.
Does
Yeah.
that sound like a plan?
Yep.
Okay. So the first one, as I kind of said before, the last plan was written at least from, TSA had its own section. Now we're trying to write the plan to bring both together. But I think what the debate has been is the urban park framework something that we're okay with throughout all of Reston?
No.
Yeah, I'd say no also.
No. The
Definitely.
the urban park framework applies to the TSA areas. The suburban county plan applies to what we call Old Reston or PRC, even though we acknowledge there are PRC areas within a TSA. So I do not want urban park framework to dictate the rest of Reston.
Yeah, I agree with Tammy on that. The rest of Reston has its own fabulous set of well-established parks and fields and that sort of thing. And I don't see that the urban park standard should change any of that. I think the urban park standard may extend beyond the literal TSAs and may continue elsewhere in the corridor, which has never been touched by RA. But subject to that qualification, I think that's where its focus is.
I think the stress of the urban parks framework as well is that it should be stated that that's an absolute minimum. I mean, the fact that it's called,
Bravo.
a framework or standard, is somewhat problematic, but I think it needs to be emphasized that it should be held as the absolute minimum in the TSAs.
But the one qualification on that, Larry, is you make it sound like it's a single set of numbers that establish a minimum. In fact, it's a very flexible recognition that there are a variety of types of parks that go into urban areas, whether they are, pocket parks, linear parks, civic plazas. There are a lot of different things. It's not a single numerical test.
Right. Now, I understand that, Bill. My point was simply that, when a developer comes in, I'm looking across the street at, Halley Rise here. They do the calculations on their square foot for residential, commercial, and office, and they come up with their, sort of minimum requirement they've got to put in due to the urban parks framework. And I just want to stress that that's a minimum. And they should strive to achieve.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And also that they should be encouraged to work together to the absolute, as much as conceivably can be strong-armed or encouraged.
Yes, I agree.
It's pretty much used in two areas, the urban park. One is the acreage based on the land area. And two, it's the amount of dollars that go to the park fund. It's not used outside that pretty much in a regulatory context. So that's what it's all about. And it's used throughout the Tyson's, maybe a little bit in Mount Vernon and in the Reston TSAs. That's the way parks use it. That's the way the staff uses it. So we can do what we want, but that's pretty much the long and short of it. It's not used in the more suburban areas.
And then the other thing.
But you do need some standards in those suburban areas. And the only one we have that I know of is the 20% of the net lot that's in the last comp plan. I'm not sure what else is in the other park standards. Larry, is there a dollar value, a dollar figure in those? I'm not sure.
You're on mute, Larry. Larry, you're on mute. Larry, you're on mute.
Thank you. There's a policy requirement for the contribution to active recreation, which they can either satisfy on site or give to the park authority. And then there's the ball field contribution in the TSAs. In terms of general park standards, a lot of organizations used to rely on the National Rec and Park Association standards. They haven't updated those for years. And then when the county, the park authority did their, basically redid their master plan, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, they came up with service level standards. And so, I think in almost every case, we already exceed any of those established standards when you look at what RA provides, even including the clusters like the tot lots and things like that. So I'm not so sure they would be really worthwhile in incorporating, but we can certainly take a closer look at that.
You said it was their FCPA that came up with those, Larry?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So what you have,
service level standards.
to get to the final here, I think use the urban standards in the TSAs. That's the way it's used now, and use the other standards in the other areas. And I think what you were talking about, Larry, is how you calculate the number of ball fields, other recreation facilities in all of Reston. So that would apply to both the urban and the more suburban areas in Reston. And then, yes, I would keep the 20% minimum in the neighborhoods.
Larry, I think where it might come up is to the extent you have a redevelopment, the St. John's kind of thing. I don't know. I'm not taking a position on any of them, but those will come up from time to time. So there ought to be at least some standards so they don't feel like they can just ride on, oh, well,
Right.
RA's already done it all.
Right.
Right, no, I agree. Mhm.
Most of our new development will be in the suburban areas, not in the TSAs. We have very little development left in the TSAs.
Okay,
Not-
and then the other thing I wanted to address is the pocket park idea has, I don't know, at least 20 times it's been mentioned to task force meeting. And I looked at the urban park framework, and a pocket park is 12 by 12 is the minimum. So is that okay? Do we want to continue to see that in the TSAs, or is there any language you want in the plan related to a minimum? Which I think
This is-
pocket parks are the smallest right now.
Sidewalk
This
that goes
is-
through what?
In the TSAs, pocket parks are defined as a minimum of 12 feet by 12 feet. And there's a
This is-
couple other stipulations that are in there, like they have to be useful. And I can show it to you guys. But that's the one that I feel like sticks in our crawl in Reston. So should we say anything in addition, even in the TSAs, as to what the smallest component of a park or open space should be defined as?
This is one of the reasons I was so freaked out when Walter was talking about the county 14 acres over by the Herndon Monroe station, and not pocket parks per se, but we have suffered through crazy definitions of pocket parks that are a shrub next to a sidewalk and a space over in the north of the it's not no use of telling you the exact area, but it's the size of a dumpster, and that was the total sum open space pocket park for one development, which is absolutely criminal. My concept is, are you providing an environment with, and let's go back to the 14 acres, when that is going to have, the hundreds, if not thousands, of DUs planned there, plus commercial. You have people living there. These are human beings. And how are they going to live there? There are no parks in that specific area, save a very infested wetlands, which is a hazard now with mosquitoes versus a recreation. It can be cleaned up. Will it be cleaned up? We have no control over that. But it is not near any parks whatsoever. So it's not even within walking distance of a park. So I am very concerned that the park label has to be truly, and when we're looking at how we design things, we actually have outdoor areas where humans, not to, and that's even leaving the wildlife out of it, but where the residents who live there can actually get outside and exist. Thank you.
So let me comment, if I could. I mean, I agree with the importance of people having access to open spaces, totally. But keep in mind, the TSAs are surrounded by 2 golf courses, the WNOD, Lake Fairfax Park, and that's before anything. So people do have access to a huge amount within a short distance. However, now back to the pocket park question, which was the one that was originally raised by Jennifer. 12 by 12 is a rug. I'm not sure that's a park, even by creative thinking. I guess, my gut says it should be bigger than that, but I don't know what the numbers should be. I think maybe a way of doing it is to describe what a pocket park would do. And to me, a pocket park is an area where there is room for people to undertake actual activities. It may be bocce ball, but it may be the activities and quite a few people. I don't know what that means, 5, 10, 20, some reasonable number of people that can recreate or at least rest and enjoy the nature around them. But 12 by 12, just you'd be in the shade of one tree, maybe. I'm not sure that's a park.
Yes, and I actually, I was fibbing there. I looked at it, and that's not the smallest. The smallest is what they call linear recreation space, and that is a minimum of 8 foot wide.
Oh, but 8 feet wide, but maybe 100 yards long, and or connected
Right.
to other things. That's legitimate. The WNOD isn't very wide. It's a hell of a park.
Yeah, I just didn't, I said that was the smallest at 12 feet, but there is a linear park that can have 8, like you said, much longer. It is probably more of a trail or, path to get somewhere else. But that is technically the smallest in the plan.
I mean, 12 feet wide, but longer than 12 feet in length, 40
The linear
feet.
one, yes. The pocket park, no.
Okay. Yeah.
It says a pocket park is designed as a single room to provide limited casual open space.
So that's in the urban park standards, right? I don't see
Correct.
why unless you're advocating for one, a specific location, I don't see why you even mention it in the plan. What are we advocating for? Are we advocating for a park situations? Is that what we're doing? If we're not, then why?
And we eliminate pocket park from the.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And
All right.
actually, it's 12 by 12 inches. That's a
God.
No. That's a stamp. I don't think you should try to eliminate the concept of pocket parks, because a well-designed small park can really provide benefit to people.
Then it's not a pocket park, Bill.
Yeah, you're not taking it out of the urban standards. Those will remain. The question is, what are you advocating and where would it go? If you don't know, then let it go.
Can I, this is Charles. I wanted to suggest just one concern I would have is as the new development goes up, particularly in the TSA, there are no like conventional parks like a playground or picnic tables or benches like what you have in any urban area. That those, I would want to make sure that those are being provided for. And I will say I've noticed people in some of the newer developments will actually go into the older clusters because they don't have those facilities in their developments. But I don't know, is there a way in the context of this discussion to ensure that they just have those things as development occurs?
Well, in the urban framework, you have definitions of a pocket park, a common green, a civic plaza, and a recreational urban park.
Does it
And
have
then in addition
standards
to
like
that,
for density or something like for X number of people, you have to have so much of that, or is it just
No,
give definition?
no.
no, it's kind of more of a description with some pictures is the way that.
It's that we should thing, that if someone has to hit the trail across the golf course to find a neighborhood to use a playground or something, or have a picnic, then something failed. So it'd be nice to be able just to ensure that those are provided. Some of the places, there's some nice ones going up. It'd be nice to ensure that going forward, that simply that the new residential development provides for parks that people want. and it's either a private amenity or it's provided as a park by some other body.
I guess, and maybe it's worth saying this, what is the purpose of a comp plan? The comp plan is to set the vision of the place. The zoning ordinance, and in this case, the park framework, is to set the rules of the place. And the design guidelines are the purpose of them is to set the implementation. How do you do things? So I think it would be useful to keep that idea in motion as we as we develop this text in the comp plan. Don't get too involved in the actual rulemaking part or the way things are done. Keep it more at the visionary stage. And you will be more successful in getting a full implementation of your goals in Reston.
And the idea is people should have access to parks.
What's that?
Yes, and I think that we have access to parks, and I think where people, or maybe where the vision is that in the TSA, we don't want postage stamp size 8 to 10 parks, pocket parks in a development and not have some type of substantial space that
I think that would be useful to
people
say
could
that.
go to. That wasn't very eloquent, but I think that's where I've seen the rub over time.
Yes, and that's
Is
more
that-
visionary. I think that kind of language is better rather than is the park 8 feet wide or 100 feet wide. So could we craft some language like that?
Yeah, I'm sure we could. Does that sound better with everyone? Or
Yep.
you still hate
Yes,
pocket
it does.
parks?
Yes.
I mean, what's important, at least in my sense from the P&Z experience, is having a clear enough vision that the staff will try to enforce it and badger them for proffers as much as you can, but because they are single property owners, they can't always promise much.
Well, why?
You have the full range of tools, though, on the P&Z committee. You can use the area aspect that's in the plan. You can use the rules that are in the zoning ordinance, and you can use the design guidelines. You use all three of those together.
Yeah.
Make sure they don't compete. Make sure they don't compete, because that's where we've had trouble. When they compete, that means you get nothing.
Well, we need the support of the staff.
Yes.
Um,
And maybe
Can we get that by insisting that money doesn't buy you out, regardless of where this parcel is located, that you have to provide, you know, a certain service level per expected
you can say that.
resident?
You can say that if you like, that the practice has been no buyouts are allowed. I'm sure there are exceptions to that, but in general, no buyouts. You might want to say that.
What do you
I
mean?
would go for no buyouts.
well, what do you mean by no buyouts? What are
Well,
buyouts?
in other words, you can't.
Instead of providing it on site, you're allowed to throw money at it.
And the
Some-
amount of money
someplace else.
isn't enough to do anything.
Right.
And then the amount of money is taken by somebody and spent on putting up a sports tourism thing that the community does not want in one of the very limited county parks within the Reston borders. I mean, that is totally a double slap in the face. That
The
not
dollars-
only are you losing park space that you've heretofore had, that's been double counted for both TSA and existing residential, and it's a district park, and I'm talking about Barron Cameron, but now you're going to take that away and make it sports tourism, and nobody in the community will be using it for free because it's a building on precious open space that's been promised over and over and over again for playing field space.
Well,
I think this is one of the strongest components of this parks and open space chapter that we could add to this.
I mean, I guess I don't know what the sports tourism thing is really. And I guess before if it worked out that it was used, a few times a year and all the rest of the time we have better facilities. Because
That's not the deal.
well, that's not what you understand the deal to be, but I don't understand what the deal is.
Well, maybe we don't talk about Barron Cameron and the sports tourism today, but we
Okay.
make sure that we review, that will be our homework, that we review the data that is out there. And Larry was nice enough to send the board and a link to the presentation, so I can have Jose send that out to this group, and you guys can
Jennifer,
study it, and then we can talk about it next time.
Okay.
Jennifer, it's also worth for next time reading the research, the very excellent research study done on the sports tourism that recommended this in Barron Cameron Park, because it gives numbers, and those are just worth evaluating the pros and cons.
I'll just say this about the sports tourism. One, that's a study. It's not supported by the supervisors yet, and I doubt that it will be, frankly. So it's out there as a study. Giving it too much credence, I think, is very problematic. If you want some indoor sports facilities, I would not make that. I would point that towards the private developers building it rather than Fairfax. But I don't. This is a park authority, which is a separate branch of government, practically in Fairfax. It's a park development study, and it just has no authorization at this point in time. Why we would get behind it, I think that would not be a good thing, really.
John, it's in the plan.
No.
Well, it's been in the plan and out of the plan and in the plan, so that's why it's on our list.
In the proposed plan.
In the proposed plan, yes.
Might be proposed. It's not in existing, but
I don't know that it's specified in the existing version, yes.
and that there's no dollars for it and no supervisor authorization.
And so is the deal that it's in engineering false?
Yes.
Okay.
No,
That's
well,
what-
no, let me clarify, and I'm gonna.
Yeah, Larry's probably a better speaker on this.
I've got a call with Bill Bowie later this afternoon about this as well. They are doing the engineering for the approved master plan for Barron Cameron Park, which is the
Right.
synthetic turf fields. The master plan does have an indoor option. And one of the questions I want to get answered, hopefully for Bill, is whether or not the Sports Tourism Task Force has discussed any indoor option there. My understanding is that they are moving forward with the engineering and that the Sports Tourism Task Force piece dovetails, frankly, with the approved master plan for Barron Cameron Park, which is a cluster of, 8 or 9 synthetic lighted fields with the, additional parking and all that other stuff. So, the approved master plan is going forward regardless. I think the bigger question is what else will happen on that site other, either the other option with the master plan or something else. And that's the part that I don't know. But what I do understand is that the engineering is being conducted. They don't have the funds to build it yet because it's all, based on proper commitments. And I think they've pocketed like 9 million of the 22 that they need to complete the master plan for the fields. So that's kind of where that's at. But before I lose, I have the floor, before I lose my train of thought, going back to the buyout question, it's already in the policy plan that if a developer doesn't provide the recreation on site, they got to pay the park authority. It's like can't remember the exact numbers, like $1,400 per unit, you know, to satisfy that. I think what we need to put in here is a strong recommendation language that developers are strongly encouraged to do on-site recreation, in whatever form that takes. That'll go through staff, P&Z, et cetera. But make it a very strong statement that they do it on-site and not do the buyout, if you will, because they weren't able to satisfy it on-site. That's just an easy thing for them to stroke a check to the park authority. But the language needs to encourage them to put those facilities on-site for the people who are going to be living and working on their properties.
So Larry, I agree in principle. I would note that a lot of these buildings do have recreation and exercise facilities inside. So they do give some exercise opportunity. The danger of, I mean, and I agree with you in principle, it should be strongly encouraged. But if you overstate it, you end up with a whole lot of tiny pocket parks because the building has various rules for setbacks, sidewalks, and everything else, and there just isn't much land left when the guy has just a single space. So overdoing it may produce tiny parks that aren't useful.
It's better to have tiny parks. It's better to have the tiny parks than cash and no park, no green space.
I'm saying strong language really, I mean, if you just have encouragement, they're not going to do that unless you have something that mandates, because encouragement could just be ignored. I mean, that's not strong enough. Even if it's strong language, they can easily ignore that in their own interests of saving money and that sort of thing.
And this also would encourage, it would also encourage developers to group together and dovetail their initiatives within a certain area to concentrate their open space requirements to one area so that they're contributing to a larger green space.
And there's actually an example of that under construction right now over in the Wheelie TSA, where EYA is building those townhouses and so forth, and they've got a park with, I think, a basketball court and some other stuff that's happening on two separate entitlements.
Right.
So it can happen, but it doesn't happen often enough. And I guess, you know, if they are willing, maybe St. Clair or Chris could weigh in on this topic of, you know, from a staff standpoint, where they see the benefit or disbenefit of having, you know, stronger language like that. I don't know if one of them would be willing to chime in, but they're on the call, so.
Well, I agree with Larry. This is Mike Jennings. I agree with you. You know, the existing comp plan that we use in P&Z says 20% publicly accessible open space per project, but they can do it off-site somewhere. And it's always hard to force them to do it on-site because they have this out. And I'm with you, stiffening that up a bit. If they want to combine it with another guy's development between the two of them, they get 20%. I'd be okay with that too. But giving them this out is not meeting our goals for the, you know, the kind of community I think we want.
But I guess one other thought on it is the plus side of the money is the potential for increasing the capacity of athletic fields or adding athletic fields. They're not going to fit beyond the three that have been identified. They're not going to fit in the TSA. And so the money is off-site. It goes off-site to potentially adding the athletic fields. You're not going to fit.
I'm going to say that the three of us sit on the PNC and we see this, and we see it probably more than other people on the task force, except for Larry. But are we proud of the result so far of the TSA regarding trees, greenery, environmentally healthy developments? I am certainly not. To get a tree planted is a major act of God. And I'm sick of this being, oh, we're doing you a favor planting a tree. No, you're part of the community. Provide yourself, provide your buyers with something laudable that is going to actually help our environment instead of squeaking by with the minimum requirements and maximizing every square inch. And we've seen that over and over again with infill parking lot development. As John said, in the future, we do have to pay attention to the rest of the TSA development. We're a day late and a dollar short, but we are having a good plan, trying to, make the rest of Reston, overcome the deficits of the TSA, but that's not how a good TSA is developed, in my view. You can see that in Tyson's. We want as many trees, as many places as possible for heat island effect and every other environment place. And these little pocket parks just don't make it. And are we seriously, there's a whole philosophical debate on Reston Association is privately funded. The county doesn't pay for that. And the Park Authority is our other source of parks and open space in Reston. And they are having a hard time coming up with money to do anything all over the county. So how do we get the most bang for our buck? It's writing a plan that is as specific as we can get without being hamstringing the people, to get them to participate and make the area truly beautiful and livable, placemaking, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
I
I
wonder if
think
there's
that I'm
is
going
there
to
a clear
add just,
understanding of how this works? One, you get the 20% on site. You get that. Now you can design that in different ways. And you get a contribution to the park fund. You get both during the regulatory process. And the park fund is set in the urban park standards. It's certain dollars per square foot of site area. So you get the area on site, the open space on site, and you get a contribution to the park fund for every project.
I'm just going to add, I think the pictures showing what we want is really important
Yes.
in this section, and John has started to help us with that.
Yeah.
I thought in the TSA it was 15%, and everywhere else it was 20. Am I wrong? Should I fix that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what.
I have the comp plan. I actually didn't remember what it was right here, and on page 131 of the 2015, it says that the open space goal to be 20%.
But
Even in the TSAs.
But is that referring to the
TSAs.
TSAs as well as the?
That's just. I think this is in the TSA section only.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So I'll fix that. Thank you.
So can that be written into the plan as well as in practice?
Yes. Be careful, but yes, you can do that.
Yeah, and this is St. Clair. I just wanted to add on the question about having stronger language. Again, I think the key is just to again remember the comp plan again is not law or requirements as is going on. So it's kind of it's trying to find that balance of language that encourages what you're looking for, but also, and I think just get mentioned at the beginning. Also, we have to look at how would it be implemented. So we have to be clear that stronger mention and there is a mechanism to actually implementing whatever the intent, the vision is. So I think those are the things to keep in mind.
I got cut off mid-sentence and lost a few minutes. I reserve my rights as to anything you agreed to while I wasn't there.
We only added 2 bullet points. right here, the pictures and making, and Sinclair just said the implementation language. And it's not specific. You're trying to say, Sinclair, it's deliberate, I guess, with what we want. Maybe that's a better, did I spell
I'm
that
sorry.
right?
Say that again, please.
That you said to ensure the implementation language is, and I said specific, but you didn't. And so I'm thinking the word is deliberate, the implementation language for Parks and Recs. Is it that we want it to paint the right picture? Is it that we want to be specific? What is the goal for the implementation piece?
Yeah, I think the challenge is, I think it's more, maybe deliberate is the best word, because we want to be careful with being too specific, because again, part of a comprehensive plan is for allowing some flexibility to reach whatever the vision, or the goals are. So again, it's we can get very in a zoning ordinance where it's rules, we can get very specific. In the comp plan, again, it allows some flexibility because as different applications come in, different properties, we still want them to be able to reach that vision without being too hampered down where it makes it can make it difficult to reach those goals.
So does anyone else have anything on question 1?
I don't know where it fits in here. The urban park framework is fairly flexible, and the athletic fields don't need to be within a 5 or 10-minute walk, but they need to be in Reston. So I guess it's okay the way it is. Thanks.
If we want them within a 5 to 10-minute walk, we could make sure there is language in this chapter, though.
Yes, please do.
Okay, which golf course are you going to give up? Because that's the only space within a 5 or 10-minute walk. I mean, literally. And
I think what I would like,
your definition, Bill.
There's a
I would
parking
like,
lot.
yeah, there's lots of parking.
There's a lot for the parking lot.
But I think, especially in Reston East, but I think that I've seen beautiful pictures of large fields on top of buildings. And I remember we've had this conversation before where, getting creative with how we have this space. Like maybe you have the open space on the lower portion of the property, but you have a field on the top portion. I don't know how big you can get a field because I think they've done it once or twice in McLean and we haven't been able to get a full size field on top of a building, but I've seen some beautiful pictures of developers accomplishing open space high up.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, Gary, we can hear you.
I've been muted I was over 2 hours in the dental chair, but since about 11:30 or a little before, I've been muted, so I haven't been able to join this, but I'll go back and just say, going back to Tammy's comments about doing this better in the TSAs is really needed. It isn't done well in the TSAs. I guess I don't agree with you, Bill, but they should just be able to walk over somewhere else. And also going back to the point where John Carter talked about the vision and so forth, expressing that and what Jennifer said, making sure that is in there. So those are the points I'd like to make, and making sure we don't end up with those bad pocketbooks, as Tammy said a bunch of times. So TSAs need to be better. That's the bottom line.
Anything else?
I think just want to make sure those points are understood, and we get to, what you were framing up, Jennifer, after John's comment about what we're doing here. and make sure we are doing the right thing for Parks and Recreation in TSA. Thank you.
I need to say this, just be careful of pointing this too much to the TSAs and forgetting the rest of the neighborhoods. The TSAs are largely over with, folks. The developments are largely approved in the TSAs. Not going to get much more development in the TSA. So we should make sure we're pointing this open space to all of Reston, not just the TSAs.
As well. You know, we don't want to go in any one direction too much, but I'll second that. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to question number 2 about community organizations.
So
We
this
want,
way, you know, in one of the multiple drafts that I worked on, I think it is important to list out the organizations that do provide park and rec services in Reston. We got, you know, obviously RA, RCC, the Park Authority, the YMCA, which is the only Y in the county, so I think it's important to note them, and it sits on county property. Neighborhood and Community Services, which runs the Southgate Community Center, as well as the Reston Teen Center, which is cohabitated with the Y, and that was part of the deal, putting it on county property. I think all of those are important to at least acknowledge as providing some level of park and rec service and programs to the Reston community. And I don't understand why some people feel that should be stricken from the text.
Larry, do we include every swimming pool and every apartment building in the TSA? Do we include every dog park? Do we include every pocket park that a developer puts in but is not open for use by the public?
I'm only talking about those that are open for public use. And quite frankly, Dennis, Restons aren't public, although you can buy a non-resident pass. But we provide the yeoman's share of the facilities for the community. But I think it makes sense to name those. I mean, yeah, we're not going to name an apartment building because it's private.
Well, isn't RA private?
We are private, and the YMCA is private as well. But the YMCA provides $400,000 of scholarships a year to the community.
All right, but that's a different issue and a different question. You know, good for them, but it doesn't have anything to do with this.
Dennis, I'm with Larry on this one. The fact is, Reston is unique. There is no place else in the county, and maybe not even in the state, that has a community with so much open space, so many recreational opportunities as we have in Reston. And we should be damn sure we're proud of it and mention the big organizations that provide the majority of it. There are also additional things. There are ice rinks and private, gyms, exercise gyms, and even private. But we can mention those as a collective. There are also, but the big Reston should be proud of what it's got. It's huge. And then the Division Park Authority with the WNOD. That's
Bill. Look, Bill, we seem to forget, because Reston is unique, that Reston is an HOA. And there are lots of HOAs, and you don't list all of them. And look, philosophically, my concern is all this discussion that we have is, it appears to me we're looking at how do we accommodate to the developer's desires. And what I think we should be doing is working to see that the developers accommodate the vision of Reston. You know, Reston is different, and it's not McLean, and it's not Chantilly, and they should be adjusting, working with us collectively to try to improve the vision of Reston, instead of us trying to get nickel and dimed on every square inch of space that we have to give up.
This is, I agree with Dennis. This is my distinction is between publicly funded and private property. And if the county were giving any sort of support to Reston Association for paying for maintenance of trails or the fields that people wander over and use at will, who are not necessarily RA members and pay the $700 dues per year, you know, this is a problem that we need to have some parity between Reston that self-funds almost every recreational thing with the exception of a few, very few park authority parks. There's no class programming. That's all paid by RCC, which is also self-funded by Reston residents. You know, it's self-funding versus county funding. And because we do it now, doesn't mean we should always do it or be an advantage for developers who don't give enough money. If they give substantial amounts to per dwelling unit for their proffers, $10,000 or something, this is expenses in perpetuity. This isn't just a buy-in and get out of town. That's my problem. And I agree with Dennis. Private is private, public is public. I think we can mention it, but we also should mention that we, you know, this other part of the equation.
I don't understand how they mesh. I don't understand. The one is a statement of what we have in Reston, but you're talking about funding and that sort of thing. And I see them as two different things. I don't see them as correlating in the same thing. One is one topic about including the YMCA and Southgate and that sort of thing. And the other thing is about funding new development. I don't understand.
Well, in some of the language that was in one of the earlier versions, there was an acknowledgement that RA provides the vast majority of the locally serving parks and rec facilities, pools, tennis, tot lots, pathways, you know, to the Reston community. And I think you added the language at one point, Tammy, that they are, you know, self-funded or member funded and not in the public realm. And yet I think we do need to acknowledge that there are certain things that we do, pathways being the chief among them, that are fully in the public realm. You know, let's not talk about pools and tennis courts in that respect, but you know, the pathways, the underpasses, the overpass, et cetera, those are fully in the public realm. And to the extent that those can be acknowledged and somehow, in some way, shape, or form, leverage, you know, some future assistance with that. I mean, heck, we mow the roadway as well. You know, we subsidize that each year, you know, more than what VDOT pays us. So there are things that we're doing for the benefit of the entire community for which nobody else contributes except the RA membership.
I agree with you, and I would like that RA be compensated partially, at least, for that role, and we're not getting that. And by the way, I'm not sure if the McLean plan has gone through, but I understand that they have pathways that are going to be county funded. So what's good for McLean is good for Reston. So let's have parity across the county and not have Reston continue to be a self-funded mecca and a gem because of it, and then have people coming into the system who want to take advantage of that. So I think we're telling the same story, Larry, but what's missing is that assistance from the county to continue maintenance of these amenities that RA has been so generous in providing. Thank you.
Either from the county or the development community.
One or the other, but we need help.
But if you don't describe it, and if you don't describe what's out there, then you don't have any basis for asking for anything. I mean, and I think it's just describing where we are now based on these extraordinary organizations and even some private providers. And then, yes, we want more, and we want support for what's there. But that backdrop for any member of the Planning Commission who isn't familiar with Reston, hasn't spent a lot of time here, they need to know what we've got in this area and what's already on the ground. Even if it's only available to members, fine, say so, but it's there.
Bill, listen, Bill, that would be great. That would be great if in fact that happened. But as we saw, and Tammy and others of you who were on the first iteration of this years ago, know that county officials said, you know, why do we need to spend money in Reston? You've already got all these things. we're not going to
Exactly.
get more, we will get less. And that's, it's hard to argue with the logic of that. But the reality is that what we pay for is what we pay for. And what, your home is your home. And you don't have to list it as a county resource. So, let's get what we're entitled to and go from there.
Well, can we agree to a compromise where we at least mention that Reston Association as the HOA provides amenities, but these are recommendations? And that would apply to the county and to new development? Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Well,
Not for me anyway.
Okay.
Look, we did this
I think
earlier version of this. We had language that I thought everybody had agreed with, which is basically a sentence that says, Reston Association is a privately funded HOA that does provide resources to its.
That's what I was referring to, Dennis.
Period. But not get into
that's
tennis
the kind of
courts,
language I was referring to.
swimming pools, pathways.
I think we did have language that everybody agreed to, and I'll
we did.
throw in that Larry accidentally left off Reston Town Center Association, but I think we had language that, laid it out without going too overboard so that you're not, setting the stage for the county to ignore us as has been done in the past. So maybe we ought to go back and look at the language that everybody, I think, looked at that did what Lynn is talking about and Dennis just said.
And I think we want to pick up on what John Carter keeps repeating. Recommendations, recommendations, recommendations. Have
Right.
this in a very small, condensed description, and then we recommend this. And basically the issue would be the county has to step up and developers have to step up.
Right.
But it wasn't that in? I mean, I'm sitting in my car, so I can't
Yes,
really
it
look at
was.
stuff.
It was in the latest version. It was.
So maybe we're spending a lot of time talking about something we don't,
The
need to worry
intro
about.
the intro paragraph does right now have
Yeah, listen.
a listing of all of the entities that provide services. So that's what this question is getting towards. Does that stay in the plan or?
John, is that standard on all the other comp plans the county is putting out?
I think it stays in the plan.
I would say they don't list homeowners associations, but other than Cardinal Forest, there aren't any other ones the size of Reston. I think the way we have it is fine. And my one caveat is maybe you want to recommend it, and here's in the TSAs that more people are joining RA. I don't know if you want to say that or not. I'll leave that up to Larry, but that would help the funding aspect.
Yeah, and I would say that goes in the land use chapter.
That could be. Yeah.
I agree with the land use chapter.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
in this chapter, what I'm wondering is, are we looking for public-private partnerships to achieve the facility goal list that we'll talk about later? Do we want to see those public-private partnerships to get all the facilities that are on our wish list?
So let me say, if you look at what's on page 1 of, I think, the correct copy, it describes the public, several public, quasi-public, nonprofit, and private organizations currently provide. It goes through that. And the last two sentences are, as development occurs in Reston, additional publicly accessible parks, recreation, and cultural facilities will be needed beyond those that now exist. As development and redevelopment occurs, public parks, recreation facilities, and open space will be provided collaboratively through proper contributions, public support, and private donations. So it's calling for more money from developers and the public. I think the sentence is in, I guess this is John's draft, but it's based on the existing plan, it seems to me makes sense. And I don't know why we'd want to take it out. And it belongs in parks, recreation, and open space, because that's what it's about.
So based on the draft that we have now, is there any objection to the balance that we have in the beginning, it sounds like, and then at the end? Do we want anything stronger, or do we want to remove anything? So when I was thinking about community organizations, what I was thinking is if we're going to list them in the plan, then these are also groups that we would look to assist in providing them as well. So FCPA is in the beginning, so we would look to them to assist with the facilities. We're going to look at developers because they're going to have contributions. Are we going to look at RA, Southgate's Community Center, the Y? Are we going to look at all of those as potential partners to getting our list of facilities?
They already are. They already are partners.
Not really.
The community center works with RCC and RA for programs.
Well, Jan, the county pays for the Southgate, and the county pays for the park authority, but that's it. Private funds do the rest. Memberships to the Y, dues to RA, et cetera, et cetera. RCC is a 4.7 tax. That's a huge surge tax that not many people are aware of because and we won't go into why, but you know, this is my issue is who pays in perpetuity. It's building something is one expense, maintain it in perpetuity. And if it's going on county land that's scarce, then you lose that open space for trees and for active recreation. You know, you may have indoor recreation, but you don't have that precious outdoor space. There aren't many places where you can put large fields. And by large fields, we're talking about mini fields that are turfed and lit. We're not talking about full-size regulation fields. That ship has sailed. We're out of luck there. So there you go, you know.
Yeah, look, I'm always confused by this because I think, John, as you mentioned, there's certain things that have already happened, like in the TSA. And in the TSA, the deal was 3 full-size playing fields in the TSA and an additional 12 playing fields in the immediate vicinity. You know, where are they? Where are the 15 fields that we're supposed to talk about? And what I see is there was a commitment made trading off density for these playing fields. We're getting the density, but we're not getting the playing fields. So do we just sort of sweep that under the rug and say, well, they fooled us then, but you know, we're not going to let them fool us this time?
Baron Cameron.
Absolutely.
Baron Cameron is already accounted for. It does not count for those additional fields. And if you turf them, it still doesn't add up to the 12. All it does is create a huge expense and possibly injure our young athletes.
And Baron Cameron is already oversubscribed. It's a district park. So, you know, Herndon, Great Falls, Reston, Oakton, Vienna, they all are involved with Baron Cameron. So we didn't have enough fields there in 1976. So what would make you think that we can add 12, the population of the TSAs to that, and it's okay? It's not okay. It's double counting, triple counting, quadruple counting. You get
That's why everybody's drooling over the golf courses.
100%.
Yeah.
Why not leave the language the way it is in the first? It's the first couple paragraphs.
I agree with that.
And then this issue of whether the facilities are going to be funded by RA, whether they're going to be funded by the Parks Department, whether they're going to be funded by the private, let that occur at the time of when each facility is talked about.
I still think we need to list them all. I think.
Well, they're listed there in the first 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, just an overview, and then yes, more in depth in the sections, absolutely.
I don't think Southgate is on the draft here, and I would include that as well.
Yeah, put that in there.
I thought that was in there. Wasn't in there?
I would include it as neighborhood and community services, because again, they run Southgate as well as the teen center. It's the only teen center in Reston.
Absolutely, they're very important functions. And the
It's in
county
there,
does provide funding, but not enough for a lot of things. That's why you have the Southgate Advisory Board and the 50C3 that gets money in order to get uniforms for the kids and that sort of thing.
I think there have been drafts where Southgate has been mentioned. On page 1 of what I believe is the current draft does not include it, and it just should be slipped in. Nobody disagrees with that, so let's just move on.
Yeah.
Good. Let's move on, please.
Okay, so Southgate, we are going to list it as Southgate, or Larry, was it called, do I have this right, Neighborhood and Community?
Well, by the time this is done, it may have a new name. It may be the Kathy Hudgens Southgate Community Center.
Oh, right. Yeah, they're going to name it.
And the Reston Teen Center.
They've not come up with a name yet.
So what is
Correct.
the overarching entity?
Fairfax County Neighborhood and Community Services, NCS.
And there's 2 facilities. One is Southgate and one is the YMCA, right?
Well, the teen center in the YMCA, yes.
Co-located with the
Separate.
And then the end of the chapter has the
Yeah, it has mentions
what
both.
what Bill read to us, and the only other thing I heard there was to look at the McLean plan and maybe compare it to the language we have there and see if there's anything we can grab.
Yeah, you're not going to find much in the McLean plan. The open space is a page in the McLean plan, 1 page.
Ah.
Which is very typical.
But that's
Okay.
a different place.
Okay, so are we good? We good with that?
Yeah.
What we have, okay. So then let's start working down the facilities list. The first one is, do we list facilities as whole units with possibly many facilities in them, or do we list them as individual items?
Are you talking about the recreation center primarily here?
There was the rec center, there's Barron Cameron, there's another one.
But there's the performing arts venues.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which would have multiple pieces in it.
You could do that to all of these.
And I guess I would ask staff too, is from this perspective, when you're working with a developer, do they just give money and say, hey, here's the money, and they don't care what it goes toward? Is it easier to have a list of facilities that they can say, yes, I want to contribute to that concept?
They don't usually allow that. They just allow the money. They don't usually allow it targeted, but I mean, this is Reston. We might want to.
Yeah, for Lake House.
Regarding your question regarding specifying what goes into a specific facility, because of direct talks I've had with Bill Bowie about what he thinks is going into the rec center, as a defense mechanism, I would say specify what we think should be in it, because his view is that what will go into Reston's rec center and or Barron Cameron, but let's not get into Barron Cameron right now, is things that make money so that he can take those funds and spend them elsewhere in the county for poorer areas or struggling rec centers. So You know, he was telling me we're going to get 2 pools and sports courts and meeting rooms. And we don't have, in my view, that isn't necessarily the right mix. I think the community, before the decision as to what is exactly going in, I know what people wanted and said they wanted back, I don't know, whenever we were having group meetings when the task force, the old task force was in charge or in session. But the idea of having a fun pool that competes directly with RA and competes directly with the water mine, you know, and then he said, well, Tammy, those are only warm weather. Well, that's true. But meeting rooms, we have the library, we have the schools, we have the supervisor's office, you know, we have other places for meeting rooms. My fear is that we're going to be charged fees so that the money from this can go elsewhere and pay. So that's why I would specify what we would want in it. I hate to put that amount of detail in a plan, but I almost think as a defense mechanism, we need to.
Why don't we just take these one at a time and see if
So-
it's right?
So you see everything that I'm seeing, you see the list of facilities, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not
So,
sure, which one are you looking at, Jennifer? Because I'm not sure I do.
so I have the table and it says table summary of proposed parks, recreation and open space.
Oh, okay. I got it.
Okay. So the first one is Reston Greenway, rectangular field, practice field.
Where is that?
It's on page 4 of the current draft.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's
Yeah,
up on the screen. Can you not see the screen?
the print's so small now, but I have it. I have a copy of it. I just looked in the wrong place.
Okay.
I think the only
So
question there was Wheelie Town Hall.
yeah, so and this is another example of, you know, it lists a bunch of things that go into this space. So we're good with the listing of things in the bigger, whatever this Reston Greenway is. We're good with listing out the specifics instead of saying we want, the old plan would have said we had a Gardens of Remembrance and it would have been a separate line item. That's the point I'm trying to get towards.
I guess the qualification my comment would be, if we say the Reston Greenway is the WNOD trail, the WNOD trail will not have a rectangular field or practice facilities, small sports fields or any of those things.
It says WNOD trail with adjacent open spaces.
Oh, all right. I must have in front of me an older version.
Should look at the screen again.
You want me to make it?
Oh, I
bigger?
see it there. I guess I was looking in column 1, which just says WNOD trail.
Yeah, well, you have to look at the whole thing.
Okay.
Right. So that was what I was asking, is in the previous plan, these items in here would have been listed separately down here. And right now we're starting to group them. Are we good with the groupings or do we want them separate?
I think it makes sense to group them so that you have a vision of what it is we're trying to get to.
That works.
Good with that?
Maybe Bill, you're right. In column 1, it should say WNOD trail with and adjacent open spaces. Is that clear?
Yeah, I think that would be
that's-
helpful.
That's better.
Yeah.
Okay. And instead of going down this list, unless you think that there are very specific ones on the list that we need to speak to specifically, like Barron Cameron Park has come up several times, then I would say each of us have the ability to send in edits, and you can edit anything in this table.
Yeah.
That's probably better.
I would prefer if you listed WOD trail first and then Reston Greenway in parentheses, because nobody knows what the Reston Greenway is. You would think it would be Reston Parkway. So I would list the WOD trail first, and then the parenthesis would be the Reston Greenway.
Okay.
Or just put it in quotes.
Okay, I'll make a note of that, but I was trying not to edit the document because we all have the ability
Yeah.
to edit the
Yeah.
document.
Right. Okay.
So let's move down to the.
So we are down, we are
So-
done, we are done number 3A.
Can I just ask one question, going back to that table real quick?
Yep.
So under large active recreation, you've got the 100 Mill Road and Osmond Square, which are both in process, entitled, not built. Do they need to be in there if they're already entitled?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm just asking the question.
I think they should be in there.
Baron Cameron Park, you could say the same thing.
We
No,
could,
no,
I guess we
I
could change
understand.
the table name. Proffered, proposed or proffered, but not built. I don't know, something like, could we
But
change
I
the
think,
table
I
name?
think that status column is
Yeah, that's true.
quite relevant.
Yeah.
Quick question on Baron Cameron Park. When it says concept plan has been approved, is that the final plan, or is that some kind of intermediate step analysis plan?
It's the only plan we have. It's the only plan we have right now.
And I think that needs to be absolutely defined, that that's the open field plan, not the sports tourism.
Yes,
called
it
the
is.
master, it's called the master plan,
Yeah.
and that has been approved.
Mhm.
So change concept to master plan. Yeah.
When was that approved, Bill? Because
Yeah,
I've
when
been waiting
did
for the
that happen?
final meeting on that and never saw any notice of it.
It's like
Oh,
2017 maybe, something like that.
yeah.
Well, I've never heard of it.
Yeah,
Oh,
I've been
they were
waiting for
public.
it.
They
I
were
went to
public
the
meetings.
preliminary, but not the final.
Clearly not well advertised.
And not funded, by the way.
Good.
So if there are other things that are on this list that we need to talk about separately, then we can put it on the master list we have over here, but we're not going to edit the document.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're leaving this as is. So should we have a priority list?
What do you mean by priority list, Jennifer?
Like we would like, I don't know, item number 7 before item number 2. I don't know. Like, are we listing them in priority here? Do we want to have a priority to which ones we want first, second, and third? Does it matter to us which ones the county or private partners or developers make first?
Isn't that going to be a function of what the approval process is and who gets into the funnel first? And I think it's going to be kind of hard for us to prioritize.
I think it's a question of opportunity as much as anything. If you want a sentence elsewhere that I think listing it this way makes sense, and it's just opportunities, not and it should be limited to just proposed, planned, future, that sort of thing. But once you've got that, if you want a sentence that's, I'm not quite what you'd even say. We really want X, but I'm not sure if that works.
In a way, these are all the priorities.
Yeah.
So we're okay leaving it as is then.
In that sense, we can send edits.
Yeah, because it's a summary. It's not it's called a summary.
Do facilities only in Reston proper get listed or others countywide?
Reston only. This is the Reston comp plan. That is not the Northwest County comp plan or the Herndon, Oakton, Vienna, etc. comp plan. We played this game again before, where we had a bunch of parks listed that were not Reston specific, Reston focused, even though Lake Fairfax Park is abutted and it's a wonderful resource. We are planning for Reston. This is the Reston comp plan. Please keep it Reston facilities.
As a rule,
I
you
need
don't,
these.
So,
as a rule, you don't make recommendations outside the comp plan area.
Thank you.
right, so Tammy, what you're saying, you don't want Lake Fairfax recognized?
No, not in this plan. It's not, we are not planning for Lake Fairfax. We have no say what goes there. We,
Let me
we
suggest
know that it is adjoining because we have a feeling for geography, but I don't want it listed in the plan because then, well, it's there. They have, hey, Watermine is there, but Bill Bowie's putting a fun pool in Reston Town Center. What's that about? We keep it separate, keep it pure. We don't want Crabtree Park.
Can I suggest,
What about the hookup to
can I
Lake
suggest a
Fairfax?
reason that we consider an alternative to that? As Bill said, well, it's in this small tax district boundary. It's not in the Reston Association boundary. However, there are numerous people, and I mentioned this in a prior meeting, all the people that I know that mountain bike, they go to Lake Fairfax. There are a lot of Restonians that mountain bike. I know one guy that was on one of our committees who specifically moved in up Ring Road so he could go out his backyard and get to the trails on his mountain bike. And I think the linkage to Reston, as Bill talked about earlier, is really important. If we don't acknowledge Lake Fairfax, which is the single biggest park touching or even near Reston, I think we're doing a great disservice to the Reston community. That's just my opinion.
This is a planning document for Reston. We don't go outside the boundaries thereof.
Tammy,
My point being is if we don't acknowledge it, then if we want a developer or the property owners over by the former McTaco Hut, Bounce McTaco, whatever pizza, to provide a linkage to the park over there, if it's not acknowledged and recommended, it won't happen through the development community because it's not in the comp plan.
And this is one that I've been arguing for a long time. We really need connections that are marked and not little ones that you can sneak on, which is what the bikers do. And they do, a lot of them do use it, but they sneak on. We need real connections, and it's 500 plus acres, most of which is beautiful parkland. We should be hiking there. And I think off of there are some clusters who I think do have access, but they're pretty far from the TSAs. The TSAs could be using this stuff, and they should be. So I would refer at a minimum to a trail in establishing trails into the park, and then just the general map should show it. I also think
I don't have a
correct.
yeah.
I think
I don't have any
also
problem with the linkages and the trails to get there. It does not need to be listed as an asset of the Reston Parks and Open Space. If you look at a map, you have that geography and you know what it is. So,
as long as the map also shows not as a Reston specific, but a Reston immediately next to it, that should be on the map of parks, even if it's distinguished as not formally. Well, it is part of the tax district, so it is in some sense is part of Reston.
I don't know why it's in the tax district because it doesn't pay any taxes to, does it?
I don't know either. I'm just telling you, it happens to be.
I get what you're saying. We've had this argument 1,000 times on previous issues, but we can link up to it. That's absolutely what we would want to do. That's responsible, but we are not putting it in our comp plan. As John said, this is for the boundaries of Reston, and then we sneak over and do the west area. We've got that orphan area in Herndon, and we've got our hands full with what we're doing there, and we're trying to keep our plan as short and crisp as possible.
I'll just point out one other park that's in a similar situation that has something unique that is not found. There's very few places in the county that has it. Stratton Woods Park, which borders polo fields on two sides, has outdoor handball courts and lighted. So,
And they're
I mean,
open to the public.
it's immediately adjacent to Reston, but it's not within the master plan boundary. So that's another one that's in a little bit of a, finicky situation.
So why not add the linkage to the extent that we have it, add the linkage that we want, and I'm sure it'll be on the map. You can't have a map without it on it. So
That one's
let's
already
move on.
linked,
And let's
fortunately.
move on.
The last map I saw didn't have it, but it can easily be added.
Yes. And I don't know, is it just by the wheelie or are there other places where we should be linking? I don't know.
Off of Wheelie and off of Sunset Hills. But I can illustrate. Or just
It's probably over there by Tall Oaks too. Doesn't that trail, Larry, connect Lake Fairfax? I believe it.
Yes, it does. There's
a
lot of trails that go into there, including the one by the ice skating rink, which everybody uses.
Yeah.
But I agree, Bill, that we should make it more of a well-known alleyway, if you will, to get to it. But the linkages are there. They're at Tall Oaks. They're off of Ring Roads. There's lots of ways into that park that already exist.
Yeah,
they're probably on the map, but we probably need to look at it.
And are all those linkages paid for by RA, except for the ones that would go through the Taco Bell and off Sunset? Are those basically RA paths that?
I think Larry, is Buttermilk Trail, is that an RA?
Yeah. Only one of them is formally RA Trail, and that's the Buttermilk link by Upland School.
And they're existing. We're not really doing any recommendations. There's no new recommendations. They're existing, except the one even the one at Sunset Hills is sort of existing with a little parking lot too.
The one at Sunset Hills, you have to go by a do not enter private property. It doesn't say we will shoot you, but you got to go by it. They let you.
We will paralyze you, but okay, come on in.
Okay, let's move on.
Hey, we're gonna skip Baron Cameron. Okay, so we're now going to talk about the list of all parks, recreation, open space. Which
One
kind of
more
ties
time.
to what you just, go ahead.
One more time for me, only list the ones that you're going to make recommendations to.
Haven't we already listed them? In different forms?
No, there is an actual table that shows, I would say at least 90 of all of the assets, parks, recreation, and open space items that exist in Reston.
Right.
The reason why I was excited about the list is because for me, I could not foresee what we should put in this parks, rec, and open space section of the plan because I don't know it well enough. I don't know what the links are called, like they're talking about Buttermilk Trail. Maybe as a Restonian, I should know every single asset that we have, but I don't. So it would have, to me, been helpful as a reference tool to know what we have to figure out what the wish list should be. So I thought it would be helpful for future planning task force to have, an appendix or something in the plan that gets them started.
If it's an appendix, I think good, but I wouldn't. Yeah. Put an appendix in, but not have it in the plan. And as John says, go for what we're recommending.
I love the idea of an appendix and listing all of them. Absolutely.
Probably. Is it even possible to list them all? I don't know.
There's a lot.
I doubt it.
Does anyone have any objections to that?
Larry, is it possible to do what Jennifer is saying?
Oh yeah, but it's where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
Is it just is it I'm assuming this is RA and FCPA basically, but where do you draw the line on the facilities? Because it's
oh yeah, right.
We got pools, we got tennis courts, but they're membership only, if you will. So
yeah. That's hard.
So, again, I would need a little direction as to what we're going to include. We can certainly include anything that doesn't have a gate or an attendant. Those are all those things that are truly in the public realm. That which includes our, you can walk onto our ball fields as long as somebody that's not scheduled is using it. So again, we don't have to decide that right now, but give that some thought because we have a lot of stuff we can list, but there's a lot of stuff we probably shouldn't list in a comp plan. And I would maybe ask St. Clair or Chris if there are other plans where there's a list of all these things
No,
included. I don't know.
no.
I also thought that what would be nice is that it would eventually maybe be turned into an actual pictorial or map of all of, and I thought from the economic development chapter, that would be
Yeah.
a nice wish list item to have, is that it gets turned into some type of community resource.
I mean, I think that Jennifer's idea is a good one. I think it can be accommodated, and Larry will know better, but sometimes with descriptions like, however many tens of miles of trails, pathways that are within the RA system and umpteen pools within the RA system, and just general descriptions. It doesn't need, it'd be great to have maps of all of it, but
Is this perhaps a better thing to put in on the RA website as,
Yeah,
you
I was
know,
thinking
and
the
just
same
keep
thing.
it, yeah, just not have it in the master plan.
But
You
I
know,
think
a
we're-
reference source, and the RA
we are
already has maps of what RA has, so you could limit it to that.
Well, they
even if
included
it's
also.
even if it's not, ends up in this document, whereas Jennifer says it would be helpful for the future to start trying to do this. I think regardless is an important thing, as Jennifer's pointed out, and it could be a big asset to, all these other connections for economic development and so forth, and just people going around Reston.
Well, let's put it in Wikipedia or something.
It doesn't have
Well,
to be Wikipedia.
I wanted it in the plan because then I felt like we had county help to get it too, or we had developer help to make it come true. And there wasn't one.
I thought this was what
private
exists, not
entity.
aspirational.
It is. It's what exists, but in the economic development chapter, then turned into an aspiration. Of
Yes.
the listing, now go make it into something that the community can use, because it will help with the economic development piece.
right.
I think it'd be easier for people to just go through and read what we have. I do think as an appendix, it would be a good idea.
Yeah, but that was my original thought, was how am I supposed to figure out a wish list if I don't even know everything we have?
Right.
Hello, everyone. This is Jose. I'm sorry. I've been lurking tonight,
Hi.
or this morning, afternoon. I know we were 5 minutes from 1. So I didn't know, Jennifer, if you wanted to do one more bullet and then get any final thoughts from the group. I know we'll have a second meeting next Tuesday, I believe, right, Jennifer?
Yes, and thank you for the 5-minute warning. I think we can kind of close out here, and we can do our homework pieces, and then also talk about the next task force meeting, which I know is on my calendar. I can't remember though when it is. So our homework is going to be to think about, outside of the urban park framework or outside of the TSA areas, what are those standards going to look like? Larry gave us a clue, these service level standards, and maybe can find them for us, Larry, because I could add a link if you want here. We have page 9 of the Fairfax policy plan you can take a look at. That tends to be some. And then the other one is the Barron Cameron Park / sports tourism facility, which we can send out again, the presentation. So you guys can study those two things. And when we come back, we will start with Barron Cameron and then try to get to these last few that we have on the list at, what is it? At whatever the next comp plan meeting is.
The next task force meeting is Monday the
Tuesday.
28th, and the
Yeah,
subgroup is the 29th.
29th. Okay. So on the 28th, I'll plan to present everything in blue to the task force just as our update. I don't know that there's anything that we were not able to settle ourselves. So congratulations to us, because I don't see that there's anything we need the task force to fully vote on.
And Jennifer, this is Lynn. I just sent a little while ago the email that Jose had sent out regarding the golf courses. And I also pulled the specific language that currently exists in the comp plan for reference.
Okay, perfect.
Did you send that by email?
I did.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Then I will turn, or is everyone good with me turning that one blue? Is we're just gonna reference the last comp plan and use that language?
Yes.
Yes.
I agree.
That's fine, but I would just note that where we have two tables that refer to proposed facilities, golf courses are listed there, and they're not proposed, they're there, so they should just be eliminated, but using the language from before is fine.
Yeah, so we remove the language from the current plan, however it's in there, and we put in whatever the language was in the last plan. That's what we talked about doing.
And Jen,
but we can firm that up next time. You guys can reference what Lynn has sent and take a look at it. We'll firm it up next time.
And Jen, can you send the latest iteration that we're actually working on this group to this group, please? So we're all, talking about the same exact language.
Yes.
Thank you.
We can send that out too. The latest version I have was circulated to the task force, and then I believe Jen was the only one that provided comments. So you're going to see comments from her on it, but I don't believe we've received any others since then.
Thank you.
One last comment, perhaps. I would urge you, for everything you add, please take something away.
Yes.
And this of probably all the chapters should have the most graphics in it. So think about the graphics that would go with captions. That's probably the best way to communicate your open space ideas. So keep it short and don't forget the graphics. So.
And put in recommendations.
Yes.
So go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I will also send out, John Carter put together a pictorial. I don't know if it's sent out to the whole task force yet, but I have what he was putting together, so I can send that out for you guys to look at. You can look at the graphics he's come up with, and then dream up or Google search some additional.
Yeah.
Help.
It's a PowerPoint, so add right to it. Add right to it. It'd be fine.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, so expect, I have a bunch of meetings this afternoon, but this evening I will send out some reference materials for you guys to use between now and our next meeting. On the 29th, which is an evening meeting that we set up 6:30, nope.
29, 7 to 9, I think.
7 to 9?
Yeah.
That sound right, Jose? So the 29th at 7, I will see you next time.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Jennifer, thank you for running a great meeting.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Sure.
Have a nice day, everyone.
Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.
It's Jennifer.
Good conversation, everybody.
Goodbye.